Yes.
Tonight we have a very special friend of the channel, Dr. Drea.
I scream into a bag. No, I'm kidding.
She was an early guest, and we're glad to have her back. We're looking forward to talking to her about Doomsday Clock. Please subscribe and like and comment, and that helps support the channel and keep bringing you these cool things. Check the back catalog: Dan DiDio, Jason Fabic, Philip Kennedy Johnson,
Brad Anderson, Tim Sheridan, who wrote the Long Halloween movie.
And just so you know, when we're filming this is actually the Thursday night of the 2024 New York Comic Con.
And I will be going.
And he's going with our friend DP from Twitch.
Darth Pillow.
Darth Pillow. So this is a 1980. Any guess as to who the artist would be? And
It's probably...
see this right here?
Is it Mr. Golden?
Yes. So that's a Michael Golden cover.
Wait, we need to highlight something. Michael Golden does not do interviews.
No, but we
Just
could
want
still
to
show
throw
his
that.
covers on the channel.
That's right.
So I thought that was a really fun, classic Golden, the dynamic, spatial thing that he liked to do. And then inside is Sal Buscema. I think in 1980, it was probably pretty good. I don't really feel like it holds up as well now. I'm much less of a fan, but I haven't been looking at a lot of the other stuff from 1980. So I think comparatively, this is pretty strong work.
I would say so.
And then I've got one other one here. This is going to be a 90s flashback.
Oh, yeah. Oil cover? Well,
No. So this is Tony Davis. And I just thought this was really
Tony Davis?
dynamic.
I don't think I've heard of him.
Apparently he did quite a few covers for the X-Force. He did a run here for a while, and I believe he did the Internals too.
Dude, from the Street Fighter movie, I remember the hype when that movie was coming out. It was like, oh my God, he's playing I forgot the main character's name, but it was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
So this one is 94, I believe. And the thing that was fun is I didn't realize it because when I bought it, bagged and boarded, but I'm going through it and look, there was like bonus.
You guys.
We've got a Ultra Wolverine card, and I guess, is that Gene?
Dude, that's so cool. It's still in the plant. It's still in the thing.
Yeah. And of course, these deluxe were great because they were on the high quality paper.
Dude, back in the day, I would have bought that and been like, oh my God, with the cards inside, I have to keep this in really good condition. I'm going to sell it for $1,000 in 20 years.
I picked it up and I'm like, it feels heavy. And I figured, well, it feels heavy because it's, got the higher quality paper in it. But
yeah, it had to be a bit mystifying because it's like, what, why?
Yeah. So anyway, those were the two fun covers I thought we'd share. It'd been a little while since we've done any of that.
Let the Bronco buck.
So he cracked open two of them, and he ended up getting he got two Dr. Doom #1s, one with a regular foil, one with a silver foil. He got the same Ultimate Spider-Man, one with regular foil, one with silver. So that was 4 out of 6. He got a Blood Hunt, and I want to say I think he got a set. So he only ended up getting 3 different books with 2 variants of each one. And he didn't crack the last one because he was going to give that one away whole without opening it. But it's kind of cool. And it's he was talking about it. He's like, if they only do it once a year, that might make it cool. But if they end up doing it like every month, it's going to,
no bueno.
Yeah, it's going to be like variant covers, who cares?
Told me to wear a tie. You like this one?
Who cares?
So we'll see. The packaging did look nice. It was like yellow, X-Men yellow, and it had like a 2-4 cutout, the die cutout like in Superman back in the day, and you could kind of see the foil on the inside, and then you crack the box open, it would open like a box of cards, and there was an insert that told you all about it, and then you carefully lift out.
It's reading right, man.
The other thing that he did is he weighed each package to see if there was a weight difference. And he opened the 2 that were the heaviest. One of them was like 11.7 ounces, and one was like 10.8 ounces, and then the third one was like 10.7. So he opened the 2 heavier ones, and looks like someone's joining us.
My mom's like, is she a psychologist? I'm like, yeah. She goes, I like to talk to her. But...
Hey.
That sounds like a referral.
Yeah.
Arkham isn't in network.
Oh boy.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
It's in
Fair
another
enough.
network.
So, how have you been?
Been good. Good to see you both. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
The last time we chatted, you were just getting your Discord running.
Yes, we have a community going. We want to create, just like how our podcast is aimed at educating and creating psychological safety and just, sharing vital information. We want our Discord to be welcoming. We want it to be a community where people feel safe. This is just a community meant for supporting one another, asking questions, sharing Batman stuff. It's been a safe space for people. They've been sharing, how they're taking care of themselves, sharing how comics has been vital to their well-being, and just having a sense of belongingness.
I got to tell you, Scott and I have always measured every conversation we've had since we spoke to you. We've measured, like, I think that was almost as good as Drea, or that was a good conversation, just like with Drea.
That's
And
super cool. It's always a pleasure to be asked to be a part of this. If you've seen the new Joker movie, we ended up recording for over 2 hours in our coverage of, but that was a very long session, over 2 hours. That it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we have a lot of content and we've got to figure out what to do with this. But we just couldn't stop talking. Not in a good way. Like, there's lots of criticisms about this film, as you probably know.
Yes, I've seen it hit pretty hard. And then I saw for the first time this morning, someone posted, they were like, you know what, as time goes by, I think this movie might be appreciated more. And I was like, I don't know, it's gotten bashed so hard.
Well, this seems like it's right in your wheelhouse. I'd love to hear just like kind of like the 5 cent, like summary in your mind, because I was shocked. It's not my thing, so I haven't seen either, but I have watched the response, and I was really surprised to see that this response was kind of like so bad.
Yeah. My biggest question for everyone involved is who is this for? We are supposed to align with and care about a protagonist who is very violent, very unlikable, very self-serving, and there's no one else to get comfort with. Like, and it's not as if Harley Quinn is the character that becomes your, relatable go-to character in this. It's so bleak, it's so depressing. But what I will say is, as a psychologist and as an educator, there's a ton there for us to analyze and dissect and utilize. Like, I've created little bits. I put it on TikTok. I think I put it on Instagram, just like little, 3-minute lessons on, like, okay, this is what this film can teach us about the insanity defense, or, what disorders, what particular disorders they're diagnosing him with. So as a professional, I'm finding some value, but 99.9% of audiences,
right,
what are they going to get from this? I don't know that it adds or contributes something meaningful to, like, the DC discourse.
As regards Long Halloween, I listened to your Arkham Sessions about a couple of weeks ago. I actually have the one that you and Brian talked about the movie. I have that saved, like, in my shows and podcasts, and I go back to it every so often. You had also mentioned it has some parallels to the Penguin show.
So how far along are you? You're about one episode in?
I saw the first episode. It was excellent. I loved how it maintained, like, the look of the movie, the Batman movie.
I think for some of us, we've been a little burned. I don't know if burned is the right word. We're used to kind of the CW Batman series, where it's so challenging. Let's take the Long Halloween and consider how that would be adapted for a film. It's so challenging to create a grounded cinematic story with all of these plots when you have these fantastical, unbelievable characters. It's just, I think, in general, transitioning and adapting a Batman DC book into film is always a challenge. This in particular, from the art style to the noir to the kind of the underdwellings of these villains, these super villains,
Grundy,
all of the ways in which the buildings and the city itself and Arkham Asylum. It's so dark and it's not really, it's very unrealistic. It's so stylized. I think it's hard to adapt that. I was very, very grateful, and I'll come around to Penguin. This is going to get us to Penguin, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty happy with the animated adaptation, the part 1 and part 2
Wasn't it
that
a heavy
Warner
film?
Brothers did.
Like
It,
after I
it
watched the deluxe edition, I wasn't like ready to crack a smile. I was like, man,
It is
yeah,
heavy. It is
yeah.
heavy.
They did a little bit of changing the ending, but and maybe the ending of the book was a little too ambiguous or open to interpretation. I'm not sure. They solidified some of the stuff at the ending, but I very much liked the animated movie. And what I'll say, so circling back to the Penguin, I think a lot of us are a little unsure about an adaptation like a TV series that would be serious enough to be about like the gangster lifestyle in Gotham City. And because the other shows that have dipped into this a little bit, like the show Gotham, it was called Gotham, right? Was it called Gotham or Gotham City?
yes, no, it was
Gotham.
Gotham. Mm-hmm.
And then, the Titans show, I think it's also on HBO Max. I wouldn't necessarily say they were terrible shows, but they had just a different feel to them. I just didn't know that I was the right audience. The Penguin does a fantastic job taking those core elements, the ones that are recognizable for DC fans, and they just create this very believable story that sure is incredibly dark and filled with violence and sinister people who are just competing for control of the city. But just like the film, the Matt Reeves Batman film, I think the Penguin has a lot of promise around creating an adaptation that just kind of feels believable enough to be pulled in. Otherwise, you're kind of getting a story that it takes you out of it. That is, it feels too much like a comic book adaptation. So it's really challenging, but I've really, really loved it. I think that all the actors have been just truly superb. The woman who plays Sophia, I've forgotten her name, but she's wonderful. She's so captivating and incredible as, the mob boss's daughter. And there's some interesting stuff about Arkham that piques my interest. They've changed Arkham Asylum to Arkham State Hospital, so they're kind of making these changes that again are grounded in realism. But there's always that little bit of edginess and darkness and just kind of just almost a creepiness about it. Like this Gotham could be real, and that's kind of scary. That's what it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I completely agree. When I turned on the first episode, I was like, okay, this is either going to pull me in or this is going to completely dilute the experience of seeing the Batman. And so when they introduced his son, Falcone's son, I was like, I don't know, this guy feels like he's not part of this world. But then he gets offed in the first.
I was going to say, well, he doesn't last very long.
So I'm like, all right, great, I don't have to deal with him. But the whole thing with Sophia and Oz, that mixes into the world and actually, had me buying in to where at the end of the episode with the slushies, I was like, wow, this was really well done. This was interesting. And have you listened to the official podcast?
I haven't yet. I just I heard a little commercial for it, an ad for it when I was listening to another podcast, and I thought, well, maybe I should be listening to that. I'm sure it's great.
It is. So, and here's the thing that makes it great. It's not like, pundits talking about it. It's actually people from the show. Like the first one is the showrunner, Colin Farrell, Matt Reeves. And then I think Colin Farrell and the gal who plays Sophia, I think they appear again on the episodes. They usually obviously release it after the newest Penguin episode, but it's very good. I even told Scott, I'm like, hey, if you're not gonna watch it, at least listen to the podcast. It's done very well with a lot of insights from the people who actually made the show. So
I'd forgotten about that. I do need to do that. And I'm more interested in that actually than the show. Yeah.
yeah,
Fair.
So
Yeah,
I'll try
fair
it.
enough.
I'm just not in a space where I think I'm in the mood for that kind of a story right now, is all it is. I have faith that they probably, it seemed like the right people around it. And I think even just the willingness to tackle what they did with the Batman to say, hey, you know what? I think we can do this. To me, just spoke like if they're gonna bite that off, they're probably gonna be able to do it because another team may have shied away, Say, oh no, that's more than we can do. So the fact that they handled it, I just felt like it wasn't all I'm saying is I didn't have lack of faith. I just have a lack of like that mental space right now.
yeah. It's too much of one particular flavor. Maybe you're not in the mood for something so sweet or
For
bitter at this
sure.
time, but maybe
Yeah.
another time.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And I will say that just like the film, The Batman, it's there's so much desperation for there to be hope and for, all of this destruction to be resolved. And not everything ends up being resolved. It's really tough. And that might be more realistic than a pretty nice bow at the end. But yeah, no, I totally get it. If it takes a certain, I actually I'm behind on some of these episodes too. With the Penguin, it was only recently that I finally caught up, and this isn't a show that I would marathon or
You
binge.
wouldn't
I
binge it,
just need,
right? Yeah.
no, it's just you see one. Even in fact, I sometimes will watch half an episode and stop
Mhm.
and just kind of like let it sit, move
Mhm.
on to something more fun. It does take place right after the film, so there's the
Mhm.
sense of the city was totally decimated, and there's so much destruction and so many people in recovery, the city in recovery. And so like it really is kind of the dark and dinginess of I mean, this is going to be about the long Halloween, right? Like who are the people that emerge from the darkness, the dwellings underneath the city to kind of take control, while the folks who used to have more visible control, these mob families, they're on their way out. And that, I think, is what makes the long Halloween such a cool companion to the
Hmm.
Penguin, or maybe vice versa.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah.
well, like the special feature that you were on with Tim Sheridan and Jeff Loeb for the deluxe edition. How it talked, like Jeff Loeb had said, it's a story about Batman versus the gangsters and then how the freaks took over the city. So I wonder how, if they're going to start maybe sprinkling that in toward the end of the show, maybe one or two extra little Easter eggs to show you like there were more of these crazies or freaks who are going to be involved with the Penguin. And it's not so much about Oz and the Falcones anymore as it is Oz, like the Joker, the Riddler, all that stuff. So
I think you speak to
Something,
something
yeah.
interesting there as far as that goes. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see what's the motive, what direction are the showrunners, the creators going to want to take. Is this a story that's its own story, or is this a feeder for the next film? And I think that could really ultimately, at least for if it was me and I'm following this and was invested in it, it would be very important to me that they handle that correctly. Aside from the story capability, and maybe I'm being like overly, but I just know I'd find it annoying if I felt like the show was serving the next movie too much.
yeah, it definitely doesn't do that as far as like Batman. Like I don't even think he might have been mentioned once in the first episode, and it was kind of like a passing line. Where to me it was like, no, I want to know like what's I want to hear them talk more of how they're afraid of him. But there's hardly any of that. It's just whatever the plot is between the Maronis, the Falcones, and how Oz is like spinning that whole thing. So
How many episodes have they dropped, and how long is the season going to be? Do we know?
they dropped three, I believe. And then the fourth one is this Sunday. I think it's 8 episodes.
Is it full 8?
Yeah, and Colin Farrell said near the end, he's like, you're probably not going to be rooting for this character much longer. So
That doesn't come as a surprise. You
no, not
spoke
at all.
you spoke in the special feature on the Long Halloween, Drea, about the freak aspect. I don't remember your words specifically, but I want to say the takeaway that I had from that was they're not really freaks, or at least they're not freaks in their mind, and there's a sense of community amongst them. They have their code. They make seem like freaks to those who are on the outside looking in, but to them, they're kind of like us, only they're in their place. Does that ring a bell at all, or am I capturing any of what you were
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, no, I think the supervillains that are celebrating all the holidays throughout this 13 issue book, 13-month book, right? It was over a year that this story took place, become more visible. Like the way that I looked at it, it's as if because of Batman's presence and things falling through the cracks and all the attention on these very prominent couple of mob families, these colorful villains who we can probably call freaks, but these sort of like, you know, these bandits, these others, these very criminally minded people emerge as finding their way and finding a purpose in Gotham City. And it's as if it's almost like, the old ways are phasing out. I mean, that's the plot, right? Somebody is preying on these mob families and taking them out one by one. And it's a detective story. It's a murder mystery. And it's interesting. It's happening over the course of these celebrated holidays. So I love the duality. There's so much two-faced duality happening in this book, right? The duality of like, you have these celebrated days, these days that are supposed to be happy, and family comes together and they're meant to be really special, but they're offset with something horrific happens. And it's a day of mourning. It's a day of sadness. It's a day of grief and loss. It's a day of horror. What is happening? So it's that duality of celebration and mourning, or growing with the family or destroying the family. The other duality, as I said, is the mob families versus these supervillains who are kind of clawing their way from their hidden spaces. They've been hiding. They've been in the dark. Solomon Grundy is like literally in the sewers, right? So we kind of see the emergence of these characters, and these are the outcasts, and they're wanting to have more. And they want to claim their own in Gotham City, and now's their chance. What's cool is when Two-Face becomes Two-Face, when Harvey Dent evolves or devolves, however you want to call that, into Two-Face, he then also descends into the sewers, and he's exploring like, okay, what is it like to be this kind of person? Now I have this side of me that's sinister, and now I see everything that's going on. It's not a blindness. It's not a disability. It's not an injury. This is, now I'm empowered. Now I see. And he's starting to realize the true criminal elements, the really, really dark things that are happening in Gotham City. And he's wondering where his place is. How is he going to matter? So the story, one of the reasons I love the story is that it's about those dualities. It's about those kind of like two sides of the coin. And then even the ending, how you interpret the ending, has this duality to it. So it's brilliant. It's one of the reasons why this story stays so popular.
I
Is it
think
safe to
Scott.
say? Is
No,
it
go
safe
ahead,
to say
Scott.
that the couples play into that too? right? There's also like here's these potentially supposed to be respectful husband and wife couples, and yet behind the scenes there's this whole other thing going on that's totally not, it's also almost in the sewers, if you at least emotionally.
Yeah.
She's painful to watch, Gilda. Well, you can just smell the crazy on her in the movie. It's like, oof.
They really did change her character a little bit. In the comic book, she doesn't have a ton of, a ton of dialogue. Like I think you're meant to dismiss her, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
she's kind of a side character, disempowered, very quiet. So you're meant to not suspect anything about her. And then in the film, they I think they gave her more, they humanized her a bit and gave her more of this history. And I think we start to feel a sense of sorrow about her situation. Her husband doesn't spend time with her. He's obsessed with this case. He is pretty short and flippant around her. He lies to her, so you really feel for her. So I think they tried to kind of, they tried to give her a fuller identity.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like, I don't, what did she say? I can't have it, so I don't want it, and I don't want it because I can't have it. And I was like, wow, that was one
Yeah.
of the lines she said. I think it was during the New Year's when they were on the beach. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Whoever the actress was, she did a great job portraying and getting across that feeling.
That is Julie Nathanson, a fantastic voice actor who has done a few DC projects. A friend of mine, actually.
I was going to
And
ask that. Do you
yeah,
know her?
really, really great. Really great. She did fantastic with that role.
As
Who
regards
wrote this?
holiday,
I'm
no, go ahead.
sorry. Just
I
real
was
quick, who
go ahead.
the script for the film, was that Tim did that, or did he work with Jeff too, or what?
No, Tim wrote the movie.
He did. Okay.
Tim Sheridan, of
Yeah.
course. Friend of the show, Drea. You should check that one out. It's really insightful. Just dropping a dime there. You know how in the special feature you were on, like Jeff mentions like the Zodiac killer and this and that. The thought hit me when I was watching the movie the other night was I was like, wow, I'm surprised no one has tried to replicate that. Like there hasn't been a literal holiday killer, because I remember, there was like coming up as a kid, you heard of like the BTK killer, Son of Sam, Zodiac, even the Mad Bomber or whatever his name was, Szynski, who mailed stuff to people and it blew up.
Yeah.
Unabomber, that was his name.
Yes.
Unabomber. Like I'm surprised that no one has picked up on something like that, and there hasn't been someone who's in their own narcissistic way like become the next XYZ killer. So
The one thing, or one of many things that the story does get right, is the idea of a signature, some kind of personalized connection to each of the killings. And the holiday killer has some elements of that, and that's realistic. That's common for serial killers to just kind of have their signature on each of their killings or leave something behind. Was it the baby bottle thing?
yeah,
Like the bottle cap? Yeah,
I remember you asking Brian, you're like, would that dent it? And he's like, absolutely not. No, that's pointless.
Oh, right,
That's just the
right. That's
top.
in the show. Yeah. Right. Because he was able to like bust that myth.
Yeah.
But things like that, like there are going to be some telling signs that it's the same person. And in that, yes, that's a very realistic mark of a serial killer. As for why someone hasn't been a copycat, I'm not sure. My only my only guess is that because of the predictability of holidays, like we know when they're going to fall, and that might raise the threat mitigation, like that might actually help law enforcement catch the person. I could imagine that actually is going to be a deterrent. Like somebody would not want to create that as a plan because that would give them away. it depends how, it's interesting that you compare this to the Zodiac killer, because that serial killer was pretty narcissistic and willing to be vulnerable and expose themselves more to getting caught because they felt they were so uncatchable. So that grandiosity is there for sure.
Yeah, but isn't it an interesting thought? Like, if you think back to even when you were a kid, there hasn't been like a named killer of this, like the Zodiac or Son of Sam, or it's unfortunately it's only a matter of time before we hear of another school shooting at random. It could be 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, but we can count on it happening nowadays. But no one has picked up that trail and become the next, killer, serial killer. So just an interesting thing. I always,
The increase in social media and the fact that we have these computers available to us, we can document a lot more. We can capture a lot of behavior, and I think that might be one of the reasons why a like a pattern doesn't develop where someone becomes the serial killer after the first or second murders. People are are more likely to be caught because of these advancements in technology.
That's a good point. I like that. That's a good point. Very good point, actually. Yeah. What about you, Scotty?
I think it's a bad idea.
To be a serial killer?
Yeah.
Which one?
I think
Yeah, right. No, I'm just kind of like letting this wash over me. I don't know what to say about that.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, Drea, there's also some questions, listener questions that I had.
Oh,
And
cool.
He got
I,
a really juicy one.
yeah, and I'm a mediator. So, I picked out the best ones. So that's a joke. So here's one for you. It says Batman is often portrayed as a character who has endured immense trauma, but channels it into his mission. In your opinion, what can we learn from his way of coping, and how might real world people handle trauma in a healthier way than Bruce Wayne? Question one.
Great question. Listen to the Arkham Sessions and you will find the answer. No, I'm kidding. Great, but seriously, great question. What I say about Bruce Wayne is that the way in which he adapts his coping to benefit other people is pretty impressive. That it's true, he dealt with one of the most traumatic events as a child. And he was able to use his sense of justice and use his own understanding of what would be reparative for himself. At some point he decided talk therapy isn't going to help me flush these demons out. There is something terribly wrong with this system that I'm living in. And I cannot collude with this city the way that it is. I have to take action. So there are a lot of things about his choices, his identity, his career, if we want to call it that, that is adaptive. He's finding ways to use all of these really intense feelings and help other people with it. But what I usually say from a psychologist perspective is it's not without some occupational hazards. He's very isolated in this work. He is exposed to a ton more trauma, like trauma begets trauma. So now he's just exposing himself to more death, destruction, and interpersonal violence. So he's just in constant exposure to difficult events. So I would add that because of his work, he's not resolving his initial trauma, and he should look for more adaptive ways to cope, whether it's through therapeutic services or even just confiding in a person close to him. And in some iterations of Batman comics and Batman storytelling, we do see that he can be close with people, whether it's Dr. Tompkins or Selena Kyle or one of the Robins, he is able to open up and be connected interpersonally with others. And that's not a one-time thing. That's an ongoing, lifelong process. We always need social support. So that's what I would say. I'm very, very, if you've listened to my podcast, I'm very forgiving. I'm very understanding about his situation as if he were a real person. And I'd say that, everyone deserves a chance for healing, and we all make mistakes, and we all, know ourselves the best. And he chose a direction that, only he can fulfill. And you can't really blame him for that.
Well said. So, two things that I want to follow up because you sparked this. To me, Batman is like a positive psychopath. If there's such a thing. Like to me, like when they casted Christian Bale to play Batman, I don't watch like freaky, scary movies like American Psycho that he portrayed.
Yeah.
But I just remember all of the critical positivity of like, wow, this guy really went all in. He was great. So when they casted him as Batman, I'm like, oh, that's great because now he can take that psychopathic part that he portrayed, but in a positive direction with, what do you think about that? Like, do you think Batman is a psychopath, like a good psychopath or a sociopath or?
I don't put judgment like good or bad on any kind of psychological identity or mental illness. There's no good and bad in the work that I do around that kind of judgment. But I will say that the profile of someone who's a psychopath, who has psychopathic tendencies, by definition, has a disregard and dismissal of the law and of other people's feelings. So they will harm other people, they will abuse and mistreat other people, they will manipulate others for their own benefit, and they typically do not feel remorse. For that reason, I don't know that I would ever consider any Batman to be a psychopath. Some versions, and I think Christian Bale is kind of inching closer to this, some versions of Batman, however, have that sense of an avoidant personality, where whether it's the trauma history or just the experience or just the job, is very aloof sometimes and very distant with other people. And I think that might be what you're getting at, this sense of really lacking in close interpersonal connections enough to make us be like, hey, like, what are you willing to do for your goal? Might you actually get so detached from your humanity that you would do some pretty sinister and destructive things? And that's really the dynamic of many Batman comics. How close does Batman get to becoming one of these supervillains that he's trying to fight? Morally, emotionally, interpersonally, intellectually. He's closer to them than any other heroic figure that I can think of. But that's my breakdown of that sort of like, is he a psychopath or what? Like, what is actually quite, what is the darkness in Batman? That's how I would explain it.
Nice. Thank you.
I keep dancing around in the back of my head, this, as I'm listening to this, the ending of Long Halloween, the film, when basically it would appear that he has discovered who the killer was and he walks away. And I think you had some interesting, I think it was you that had some interesting commentary about that. And I think you said his mission, or it was a better word than that, his thing is to save the city. And at this point, she was no longer going to damage Gotham. So therefore his interest, and this is my words, not yours, his interest was no longer there. So he turned and walked away. That seems like really weird to me. I mean, I get it intellectually kind of, but that seems like someone who's really kind of got a weird sense of morality.
Fair. Yeah, for sure. For sure. This is not someone So as a as a as a vigilante, he's not somebody who's going to always do the right thing by the law.
Okay.
Because again, something about Batman that I think is true for most versions of this character is that his narcissism is really inflated. So he's going to make the decision on what's right for the city. And yeah, I think in that example, his job is done.
Mhm.
He's not there for the award of like the biggest hero.
Mhm.
I think too, and we see this with Batman the animated series actually is a good source material for what I'm about to say. I think that if anything, Batman has a sense of relatability with some of these villains and feels sometimes like he can understand them more than others and may likely let people go or be more forgiving because he understands that it could be their circumstances matter, you know.
Mhm.
There could be something about his level of forgiveness and his level of um, relating to some of these villains to then decide how they're treated. It's interesting because that means that there's a lot of variance in how justice is served. I mean,
Mhm.
anyway, that's true for Gotham, but it's not as if he's consistently serving justice the same way for everybody.
Right.
It's not as if his job is, I'm just going to collect people and take them to Arkham. He is at times. What do we say? Judge, jury. What's the third one?
Executioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the last one. But yes, he sometimes becomes all those things. And it's his trial. It's his, he decides what someone deserves. That's not how this works. Like that's not how the law works, but I think
Mhm.
he takes it into his own hands.
Is that the crux of the conflicts that he has? And this may be like a really dumb question because I'm not a super deep DC guy. I'm not like Brian. I haven't grown up with DC per se. Is this area of his personality, is that the crux of the conflicts that he has with Superman? Is this why he's Superman
Say
and he
more.
come to conflict? I mean, when they have conflict in the Justice League about does it boil down to like Clark Kent or Superman's morals are much more concrete and super or Batman's tend to be fluid?
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's more nuance for Batman to his, uh, and unfortunately, sometimes that will get in his own way because he takes on more responsibility in making those judgments that he really needs to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Well,
I think that's correct.
Interesting.
according to you, what makes a good Batman story to you?
Um, I've said this on the show before. I like um the menagerie. Like I like let's do Hush. Let's get them all out. Like let's flood the story with all these different colorful characters, the villains, the anti-villains, the like let's get the anti-heroes. Let's get that full bouquet of characters and spice things up. And Batman is a figure who helps us either relate to these different personalities or try to make our own judgments and decisions. Like I think it goes back to Scott's point. Like it's not just good and evil. It's not just here's your clear villain and here's your caped superhero who punches him or her or them. It's really, I think the story is in the journey of getting to know the backgrounds and origins and journeys of these people and how they relate with Batman. I think that's the most fun.
Yeah,
What
I think he's a
have
reflection of the villain.
Yeah.
He's only
yeah,
as good as the villain that he's up against, as far as I'm concerned. For me, it's like if there's a really interesting Joker story, That's like really good Batman when it's good, and after you read stuff like that, don't go back and try reading the Fantastic Four, because it's just a whole different thing. Brian, I'm sorry I spoke over you.
No, don't be sorry. That was well said, man. So got it. Thank you. Well done. I like jerk Batman, like from the 90s, where like Batman was like so into his own thing. And then he was almost a repellent to the people who loved him. So when he let people in, that always touched me more. Whereas I feel like comics today, it's like, oh, look, it's Batman and Robin, it's Batman and the Bat family. And
Yeah.
that's not my flavor.
Well, do you think that that's a strategy to be, you said the jerk, like to be standoffish and to stay isolated? Is that more of a deliberate style to take on?
Yeah, yeah. But I like that style as opposed to like, come one, come all, let's fight crime together. That it seems like DC is turning to now. So
Yeah.
but I digress. And let me pick the last of the listener questions. This is really cool.
Let's do it.
Okay. Superheroes like Batman are often relentless in their missions to save others, sometimes at the expense of their own well-being. As someone who consults on compassion fatigue, what advice would you give Batman or real life heroes like healthcare workers, social workers, counselors who struggle with balancing their mission with their own mental health?
Great question. What I usually take as an approach with the communities that I work with and I have consulted with and trained social workers, counselors, firefighters, first responders, psychologists, fellow mental health professionals. What is becoming very clear is that this concept of burnout or compassion fatigue is a very gradual experience that, it's not like you get a bad night's sleep and then it's not one bad day, basically. It's not like, oh, suddenly a couple things went wrong and my whole system is different. It is a very gradual, very comprehensive, full body experience where everything from the way that you're thinking to the feelings that you have to the physical sensations, like it's truly something that takes a lot of time to recover from. So when I work with folks, we usually start with prevention work. How do we offset something getting worse? And that might be how we take care of ourselves. I speak with organizations and supervisors and management leaders and, compel them to talk about the amount of breaks they're giving their staff. Brian, you gave a really great example about having to manage up for your well-being and really ask for some time off. So it is about prevention and creating resilient strategies for ourselves. It's about being true to our own origin stories. When I worked with firefighters, I'm not a firefighter. I was like, tell me what got you into this line of work? Like, what was the, the driving force to help me understand why you would put your life on the line for your communities? And everyone had an origin story. No one was just saying, yeah, I just picked it. But, there's always something deeply personal about those choices. And when you remember that it's a deeply personal choice, it empowers you. I chose to do this. This is a very Batman thing. What does Batman say around this? Like, I could quit tomorrow. I could quit today, but I won't do it because I chose this. This is what I committed to. And I think a lot of first responders, service workers, soldiers, veterans, that's a very empowering set of values to have. And when it comes to what we can really do, and I say this very clearly with the folks that I work with, what can we really do to take care of ourselves? It is to step out of the line. It really is to leave the work for periods of time when you need it. And that could be a day, that could be a week, that for some people that's 6 months. It does not do us any good. We are not in service to our well-being if we overwork ourselves. It's called presenteeism. People know about absenteeism, when like people kind of like disappear for some time or take too much time off. The opposite of that is presenteeism. Like, I'm going to, work harder and just like dig in and get even more lost in the sauce because I don't know what else to do. I feel helpless. And it's the only thing I know how to do. So when I teach to this, I talk about all those different strategies, prevention, as well as the intervention or postvention. And then, I tell people, like, I get it. We're all Batmaning. What does it mean to Batman? It means to have these sometimes very like black and white cognitive styles, this narcissistic thinking that like, I'm the only one who can do this. I have to do it this way. I cannot let my foot off the gas. It's too risky to stop. And that's when we get in trouble. That's when Batman gets hurt. So those are some of the analogies that I give in some of those, some of the advising that I do. But it's not a perfect science. And, I appreciate the question. And as I said before, when we were talking about how we're managing our self-care, it really is all about social support.
Is one just real quick question about yourself, please indulge me, and then I'm very grateful. Thank you. With regards to yourself, you're always so well spoken and always very, very articulate on what you're feeling and what you're thinking. How do you, with all the craziness that's going on in the world now and people freaking out and whatever the issues are, how do you seem to keep yourself in such a good space? Like, how do you empower yourself to deal with the day-to-day craziness of the society we live
I
in?
scream into a bag. No, I'm kidding. I don't do that. I mean, you feel like you want to scream into a bag. Something that I think is really, and I thank you so much. That's such a compliment. I think I'm kind of calculated because I want to make sure that, being in this conversation with you is a privilege. Not everyone gets to put their material out there and say to an audience what their opinions are. And I take it very seriously. I also represent a field of research, science, and practice that is imperfect in that, like, we're constantly wanting to do better for the world, and we don't have all the answers as clinicians, social workers, scientists, counselors, whatever. So I think it's really important to be very clear about our messaging. And also we're human. So I do have bad days. I don't,
Sure.
I don't have all the answers.
Sure.
What I do offline is I try to, the real answer here is that I actually try to take some time to enjoy the kinds of things that were in my sphere before all of these difficult things befell me. Like when you're a kid and you're reading comics and the worst thing is is like the villain in the comic, or you're reading a novel or you're watching a movie. I try to go back to those experiences, and I don't think it's escapism. I think it's a sense of real comfort and a real reminder that that we deserve to feel good and to have fun and enjoy things, even in the amidst all of this really difficult stuff. So I appreciate the question. It matters a lot to me that that I'm professional and also a real person, a real human.
Yeah, you don't come across as stuffy or like, oh, here she goes again with listen to Dr. Drea. Like the things you say, you seem like a regular person who just happens to have downloaded all this information. So
thank you. That means a
thank
lot.
you.
That's the goal. That's my mission.
No, you do great. And if it's a privilege for you to come on, it's an honor to have you. We're very grateful for you. And you're one of maybe our favorite guests of all that we've had because we super enjoyed it. Getting you back on was a big deal to Scott and I. Like it was a big deal. So when you were like, yeah, I'm coming on, I was like, yes. Wrote it on I have a Batman calendar in the kitchen and my mom
Cool.
indulges me. So I wrote Dr. Dre at 7 p.m. in marker. So thank you so much for coming on. You are very much appreciated for everything you do. You're a joy. So thank you.
Give us a quick
Thank you.
rundown of your platforms for
Yes.
our listeners.
Yes. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please check out the Arkham Sessions. It's the podcast
Awesome.
that I've
Excellent.
been running for a long, long time. I don't know, over 10 years, I think, for anything around like written articles and other clips and videos, and just to kind of check out what convention I'll be at, go to my website, drdreapsychology.com, and my Instagram is Dr. Drea Psychology. I still have an old Twitter handle, Arkham Asylum Doc. I still use it, so feel free to check me out there. And our Discord, which continues to grow and grow, is on the Arkham Sessions Instagram. You'll find it in the bio.
But thank you so much. Please say hi to Brian.
Thank you, and it's good to see both of you.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
I too have a mission.